Well, joining us here in the studio is James Nixey. He's the head of the Russia programme at the Foreign Affairs think tank Chatham House. Do you welcome a cautious approach from the Prime Minister and Home Secretary over this?
Well, caution is always prudent. One doesn't want to miscalculate and have a cataclysmic response by Russia. But at the same time, what has been proven here at the end of the day is the cravenness of successive governments' policies towards Russia since the Litvinenko assassination. What we have seen consistently is the protection of well-moneyed, Kremlin-linked interests who actually have links to UK solicitors, lawyers, bankers, accountants, etc. And I think now is the time to begin to exterminate these in order to protect ourselves. This is a chemical weapons attack, an act of terrorism, and it needs to be called out as such. Right.
Do you agree with that assessment, Tom Tugendhat, as the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee?
I certainly do agree that this is a terrorist attack. I think it's similar in kind, if not in nature, to many other terrorist attacks we've had. And the very fact that there is a British policeman in hospital, that there are two, we assume, attempted victims in hospital, and many hundreds of people are having to take precautions for fear of getting further harm, that we can see that this is a very, very mass attack. And this is a group of people who did this, had no care at all for the safety of British people.
Are you expecting the Prime Minister to point the finger of blame at the Russian state, at Vladimir Putin?
I am expecting it to be pointed towards the Russian state for the very simple reason that this is a nerve agent, and nerve agents are, first of all, extremely difficult to make. Secondly, they're very difficult to store. And third, they're actually even quite difficult to transport. And therefore, the idea that anybody except a state actor had control of this, had access to it, and would have been authorised to deploy it, I think is laughable.
And you agree with that?
Absolutely. Nerve agents are state property under state control.
Right. So what about retaliatory measures? You've made that criticism of successive governments protecting well-moneyed Russians here. So hit them where it hurts, in the pocket?
Absolutely, because those people have links back to Vladimir Putin himself. So the squeeze has repercussions and ripple effects. Of course, there's more that can be done. The cupboard is far from bare. One can have a much more coordinated cyber response. One can have a much more coordinated European response, a more coordinated NATO response even. It can even be brought up at the UN Security Council. But there are, in the realms of cyber, in the military sphere, in the diplomatic sphere, of course, one wouldn't suggest one ceases diplomatic relations. One should keep the ambassador here, for example.
Right, so you wouldn't send them all home?
I wouldn't send them all home, but I would send those home who have proven links to other affiliations other than their designated affiliation, shall we say.
Right. I mean, would that have much effect anyway, just literally shutting the embassies and sending them all back?
Well, I completely concur with what's been said so far, but I think we have to go deeper. So Britain has now become the jurisdiction of choice for dirty money associated with the organised crime, criminals, kleptocrats, all these sort of people. And there is, I think, a lot that we could do pretty quickly to try and make us less likely to have this.
For example, yeah.
One, there are 85,000 properties in the UK today that are owned by shell companies, mainly located in our tax havens. Many of those are Russian-held. If we had the public register of beneficial ownership of the properties, which Cameron and Osborne promised, and which this government is now delaying until 2021, that would be one thing. Two, we are very lax in how we allow companies to be incorporated here in the UK. Can I tell, I know this is going on a bit, but it's important, Joe, that many companies choose Britain. So if we look at a thing called a Scottish Limited Partnership, this is a structure that was set up to help farmers in Scotland invest in their land. There's an analysis been done by Bellingcat recently, which shows that people of importance, whatever it's called, the people of importance in the analysis done, only 4% of them were British people, and the actual people who incorporated those companies were Russians, Ukrainians, and people from Belarus. So these are structures that are being used by people in Russia and elsewhere to hide dirty money, and we should go.
Has the government failed in terms of making it too comfortable for wealthy Russians to choose London as a place to settle?
Look, I agree with Margaret. I don't think we've gone far enough, frankly. I think there's more that we could do. I think dirty money, as Margaret quite rightly puts it, not only allows others from, frankly, questionable jurisdictions to hide their ill-gotten gains here, but it also corrupts the very system that we're trying to protect.
Yep.
And actually what we've got to do is we've got to demonstrate that the city is absolutely the heart of the international financial system. And in order to do that, we've got to show that we're clean and honourable and law-abiding. And by the way, 99% of our business is. So actually what we're talking about is sorting out a very small amount and making sure that people who do invest in London do so knowing that they're dealing with trusted people and fully
Should money donated from wealthy Russians, unless the Conservative Party can prove the source of that funding, should that be returned?
Well, if they're British citizens and it's donated by British citizens, I'm afraid I'm not a believer in that you should search for prior affiliations. As we know, refugees come from around the world and become British citizens. So if it is lawful British citizens, if, however, it is associated to, for example, an oligarch who is still a Russian citizen and it's done through a front, well, no, absolutely. That's
right.
not
I mean, the
acceptable.
Prime Minister said she was going to sup from a long spoon when it came to contacts. It wouldn't be business as usual with Russian...
She's right, it shouldn't be.
Right, but has it been? It has been,
Well, I'm
hasn't
afraid
it?
I'm not involved in raising money for any political party.
I do think we can go tougher on political donations to political parties now. And I think the extent of the exposure in the Sunday Times yesterday, over £800,000 going to the Conservative Party suggests that we should look again, perhaps at the size of individual donations or something like that, to limit the influence that people think that buys.
I mean, will that work? I mean, is there a risk that actually there are people here like Roman Abramovich, Oleg Deripaska, people who will be put off coming here to invest if we make it so difficult?
That is correct. And it will, let's be honest, have a certain negative effect on us. It will affect the UK balance of payments. We're not overexposed to the Russian economy, but we have to accept that in order to protect our national security, we're going to have to incur some form of smaller sacrifice. It will hurt them more, but it will hurt us a little bit. We have to. That's part of the deal.
Right.
But you'll never get sustainable economic growth and prosperity on the back of dirty money. So while there might be a short-term instant impact, in the long term, I think the integrity of our legal and financial systems is far more important.
I agree.
What about Russia today? Should any moves be made about that?
Look, I think it's frankly extraordinary that what is frankly an arm of information warfare by a foreign and hostile state and an organisation that has breached its broadcasting licence on numerous occasions still is able to broadcast freely. But look, that's a matter for Ofcom. It's an independent organisation, and I hope that they are looking at it very carefully, because this has been running, and it's not just Russia Today, it's also Sputnik based in Edinburgh.
The Magnitsky Act, which is about clamping down on corrupt money, do you think that would actually achieve something?
Yes, but you can do much more. You can do an affectation of the American CATSA Act, which is not just for human rights abuses, but also for Kremlin Russians. You can do unexplained wealth orders. You can do money laundering investigations. There's a whole package of measures, as I say.
Right, but the Labour Party said they tried to amend the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Bill in Parliament to add a clause similar to this Magnitsky Act, only for it to be blocked by your party.
Look, there are many people on my side, including Andrew Mitchell, me and others, who have been pushing for Magnitsky-type orders, and indeed First Act has already gone through.
So it was a mistake by your party to block it?
Well, I'm not going to go through the details of the way that amendments are used for political chicanery in the Commons. But what I will say is that there are many of us on the Conservative side who have often pushed for this and who are still pushing for this. And so this isn't a party matter. Indeed, Margaret and I agree absolutely on this, that we need to be much clearer on this. And what we need to do is we need to do exactly as James is saying. We need to be absolutely hard line in making sure that London is not a playground for wealthy oligarchs who are, frankly, the aristocrats of a new Tsarist regime.
Just briefly, let's look at the report that's been published today, in which the term Global Britain cannot just be a slogan. What did you mean by that?
Well, what I meant by that is, or rather what the committee meant by that, because of course this is a committee report of members of the Labour Party, Conservative Party and the SNP, is that we need to do more than simply have a slogan. We need to actually have the detail behind it. We need to have the resources behind what it means. So, for example, one of the things that we've seen since the Brexit vote, of course, is that we need to reinvest in bilateral relations in Europe, because we won't be playing through the Brussels system, and that's absolutely right. But I don't think what anybody expected was that resources would come from China in order to be invested in the European 27. That doesn't strike us as very global Britain. So what we're asking for is, what does global Britain mean to the government? Could you put some meat on the bone so that we understand what you're aiming at? Are you selecting rules-based institutions like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank? Are you selecting individual bilateral relations? And where is the resource coming from?
Right, but you seem to blame the Foreign Office. You say that it's lost its way and that there is a problem with leadership at the top.
Well, I think that one of the things that we've noticed in the Foreign Office is that we haven't had the clarity that we require from this, and I think that's, it is up to leaders to provide clarity, and so I'm very much hoping that they will do so.
Well, do you have faith in Boris Johnson to deliver that?
Well, Boris Johnson is an amazing campaigner and has an amazing voice, so I very much hope that he uses it. to bring clarity to what is at the moment a rather confused situation.
James Dixey, thank you very much for coming in.